Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Walters, and this is the Walters Wanderings Travel Podcast. This is episode 5, I believe, of season 2. And today I have two very special guests that I'm going to introduce in just a minute. But before that, I have to talk to you all about my specials for July. Since July is Independence Day, we want you to be independent from your home, and we want you to be out on the road. So any trip that you book in the month of July with me at Walters Wanderings Travel, you will get a $25 gift card upon completion of travel to the establishment of your choice, or you'll get $50 in future travel credit. So that makes it pretty simple, pretty nice, and all of that. So that's my special for the month of July. Again, $25 to your favorite establishment with $50 in future travel credit if you book in the month of July. So today I have two very special guests. We're going to talk about two uniquely different things. I have with us Brooke Berlin, and I have her husband Johann, and they're going to talk to us about two entirely disparate things, but they're really great. Brooke is an expert on Africa, so we're going to talk about things to do in Africa, and Johann is a bicyclist who bicycles much more than I do, and he's going to talk about some of the frailties and foibles of bike touring. So thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so Brooke, I'll start with you in the Africa bit. We're doing this in alphabetical order, both in subject and in name. So, Africa, how did you get so? I mean, we understand Africa is really underappreciated. It's misunderstood. There's so many things about Africa that people don't really know. How did Africa intrigue you? What was that trigger point that started you in your love affair with Africa?
Well, I think I would love to say that there was a pivotal moment, but there really wasn't. I actually say that I was born an African in America. Nothing made me fall in love with Africa. It was just always there, deep in my being as long as I could possibly remember. Now, I grew up in New York in a very international community. And so I was always around people from around the world, and that nurtured my curiosity. But it nurtured my curiosity of music and dance and fashion and accessories and food and art. And, everyone always thinks about just safari. So for me, it was really more of loving the people. And I went on to study magazine journalism and cultural anthropology. And so I continued to study. My ethnography was actually on body adornment, scarification and tattooing and piercing. And you see so much of that across the continent. So I love all aspects of Africa and was able to, like I said, study and develop that throughout my life in the States. But then, I finally got to Africa about 15-ish years ago. And it was when I put my feet on that continent that I realized that I was home. My, spirit just flew away from me. My soul is at rest there. So I would say it's more of a lifelong kind of journey. And every time I go back, I find something else to fall in love with.
Well, I can understand that because there are a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of unappreciated, under-touristed areas. There's a lot of places that are maybe over-touristed too, and we can talk about that. But I guess the next thing is, you come from a place sort of like I do, upstate New York to begin with, and it's nice to find a more cosmopolitan community, but we know that sometimes there's things lacking there. Like, I guess my question becomes, to me, one of the biggest travel gets for me is food and the whole eating thing. Sort of like those kind of Anthony Bourdain, Andrew Zimmern type moments where you stumble upon something that just is so authentic and so real. Why don't you talk about some really authentic and really, really real eating and culinary experiences you've had in Africa?
All right. That's a good one.
A lot of good ones.
So, okay. I mean, one of my absolute favorites, I guess I would say, is Ethiopian food. The fasting food plates that they have in Ethiopia are kind of reminiscent of the thalis in India that I love. And I'll start by saying, too, I have celiac. So I'm always on the
Whoa, that can be a problem in a place like that, because it's not like the chef comes out and can tell you exactly what you can and can't have. Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's made for some interesting sign language conversations and a lot of pointing for sure. But I mean, in Ethiopia, the injera is actually made from teff, and teff is a grass. And so the injera that we have in the States is often made from wheat because we don't have teff here. So it's great. I can eat all of the food in Ethiopia. There's no question for me. They do both vegetarian and meat exceptionally well, great spices. But it's not just a matter of the food, which is wonderful. It's about the ceremony of the food. So a coffee ceremony, the incense and the grinding and how long it takes. I literally have a dress that was given to me by my guide's girlfriend when they invited us into their home for a tea ceremony. And I just happened to say, I love your dress. And the next morning, he brought it to me as a gift from her, right? I mean, talk about the depths of generosity that you experience when you travel. And it smelled like the incense and the coffee of this small little room. The fasting foods, eating with your hands, sitting on the floor, sharing a meal, that to me is what makes the experience luxurious, if you will. And so I've had moments like that in Morocco with the tagine in the Atlas Mountains. I've had things like that when we were actually in the Nubian desert of Sudan, right? Where you think you're not going to have incredible food, especially so Sudan is a dry country. No alcohol whatsoever. The tamarind juice, the hibiscus juice, the baobab juice. So it's not just about the food. Again, it's about the entire offering of what's local. And for me, the more local it gets and the more toned down, where it's with my hands on the ground, in the dirt, with people, those are the stories and the memories that I have.
No, I understand that. That's really, I think it's really important to understand that, you can have great things happen and you can have it in otherwise modest circumstances. You don't have to stay at the Four Seasons of the Ritz-Carlton to really get, something that's going to, sort of take you away and make your heart full. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Now, talk about the other part of it. We know that Sudan is a dry country with no alcohol, but obviously, South Africa has really come on strong with wine. And it's, what kind of advice do you give to someone who's thinking of maybe pairing wines with a safari in South Africa or other regions that might have wine that we might not know about?
Well, I'm going to offer one little insider secret, and then I'm going to actually turn it over to Johann, because Johann is from the wine country in South Africa. He's from Wellington, so he grew up there. While we are both winos and we collect and we enjoy wine, I think that he could probably help answer this almost a little bit better than I can. But a little insider secret is there was recently an article published on, for instance, the gin scene in Nairobi. And everyone also talks about the gin scene in South Africa. I think that you've got some really fascinating spirits coming out of different cultures and different countries that maybe we don't also know about or talk about so often. So we should talk about spirits in general and what's being made across the continent. But in terms of wine and food, I would love to just hand this one over to you. I mean, I can talk about my favorites, but come on, this is your specialty.
Exactly. No, I'm fortunate to have grown up right in the wine country outside of Cape Town. Yeah. And definitely, I mean, of course, South Africa is the wine destination in Africa and right up on the world stage. And it's important to remember there's a number of famous areas, Stellenbosch, Franschhoek, and, going back to food as well. I mean, while some of the more out there meals can be incredibly memorable and a life, memory, looking at sophisticated fine dining, just like in the wine country, let's say here in the US, the area around Cape Town, the combination of food and wine and fresh ingredients are incredible. And you have your Stellenbosch, Franschhoek, your main areas, but there's also some up and coming new areas. And some not so new, but they've just been flying under the radar. So you can actually, very often people come to Cape Town and do one day of wine tasting. And yes, you can get sort of a quick taste of what the country has to offer. But if you're really into food and wine, you can easily spend a week and just every day go to a different area. Just like, if you go to France, you've got, Bordeaux, Burgundy, and like completely Champagne, very different areas. you have the same in South Africa, and there's so much diversity. And many of the good wines you can actually find in the US as well if you do a bit of research, and or especially if you're willing to order online and have it shipped to you.
But those regions specifically, wait, so I'll give you a couple of examples. You've got incredible wines coming out of Swartland. You've got amazing wines coming out of the Hemelanarda. And the Hemelanarda also is where you'll have Hermanus. So you've got beautiful 5-star properties, wonderful food as well. Elgin is another region that people are starting to include when they're doing a drive, let's say from Cape Town out to Hemelanarda. And I mean, Johann's grandfather was actually a winemaker in Tulbagh. So these are names that you don't hear as often, right? As he said, everyone talks about Franschhoek and Stellenbosch, but Tulbagh, Hemelanarda, like there's other regions out there offering interesting things.
Well, as long as you point me to a good Merlot, I'm gonna find way, because that's the wine. My wife is funny. You know, we have all those little wine, beer, soda, refrigerators. And the wine side, half is Merlot for me and half is for her. So I mean, so that's what I always like to look for. I always look for a good Merlot wherever I go, and I'm sure I'm going to find it if I get to Africa. And one more thing before we get to Johann's passion for bicycling, everyone's concerned about all the protocols, and the COVID. It's still around. We got the Delta variant, the Gamma variant. We'll probably have variants until there's no more variants. Just the way it is. What's going on right now as far as how the countries in Africa are handling, the tourists coming in? I know that Tanzania is pretty wide open. I know that Kenya is pretty wide open. South Africa is, I think, getting there. So what's going on as far as all that goes?
All right. So first I'll say that, I know, I've been traveling back and forth to Africa. So when I'm sharing this information now, it's literally coming off of having just been in Kenya in February and South Africa in December. And I've also been to Zambia and Uganda. So I've been experiencing this firsthand. And I think we have to realize that we also have media that likes to constantly portray things in a negative way. And
no, not at all. They don't know. They don't do that. That's a lie. That's false news. I'm sorry. No, I couldn't help it.
But and we also have a media that does not, I think, accurately and consistently report on Africa. So here is the reality. When we're going on safari, we are out in these wide open spaces, to your point, as you spoke about. Africa's safari has always been set up for social distancing anyway. You've got few people on a vehicle. You're driving around outside. You're going for walks. You're canoeing. You're sleeping out under the stars. And you're doing this with few people around you. So it's always been, I think, a place where you can go and feel free of every kind of limitation that we might have, in life back here in the States. So I always felt very, very comfortable. Now, outside of that, what they've done is the countries have really worked hard to set up COVID testing. You can get that done on property. Many properties are offering that to ensure that they are abiding by the highest level of safety and standards. And it's not just for us as the tourist. I will always remind people, it is for their teams, their staff, their people. They're looking out for their own first and foremost, and we benefit from it. I have seen Africa handling COVID since last August, head and tails above what we have in the States in terms of social distancing and temperature taking and sanitization, on and on. We are going to see peaks. We're going to see waves. That's happening in many places, right? Australia just went back into a lockdown. It's not just Africa. It's the way that it is right now. So I say you can easily still travel in a bubbled situation. There's lots of different flight options. And very honestly, I'm working right now with people that are going to West Africa as we speak. Senegal and Togo never got the kind of, I think, awareness that they should have gotten for how they handled the pandemic. One of my very dear friends is an amazing physician, and he's currently overseeing one of the UN hospitals at the airport in Accra, Ghana, for on-site testing. So it is legitimate. People are always afraid of medical needs in Africa. And I will remind people, the first heart transplant in the world took place in Cape Town. And then you've got other major cities where they're catering to diplomats, expats, their own government officials. As a tourist, you're going to get good care, and they're really going above and beyond to ensure that people stay safe. So I feel very confident, and I think that you'll find you can get there and you can take your mask off when you're with your family and your friends in a private property, and you're going to have plenty of time outside and fresh air and under the sun, and all of those things are good for us.
And even some of the transports when you're on safaris have Wi-Fi, so you can still, send the videos right onto the social media. So there you have it.
Yes.
All right, now Johann, you are a bicycle enthusiast, and then your wife there was putting out some post on Facebook about some of your recent adventures bicycling through Arizona, which you don't do now. You have to do that like in the wintertime. I get it, So talk about that particular experience and, why you are such a bicycle junkie.
Well, I've been interested, and I've been riding around on mountain bikes for the better part of like 2 decades since I lived in Southern California, and actually since I moved to the States in the late 90s. And so that's my sort of recreational exercise of choice. A little bit of fun and excitement mixed in with good effort. And this year, when we suddenly found ourselves in COVID and, sort of locked down in that last year, you start looking around, you're like, what can I do? What can I do to make the best of this situation? As they say, if life gives you lemons, you try to make limoncello. And
exactly. You bake bread, but not for someone who's celiac. I get it. I understand.
So, normally, Brooke and I, especially, January, February, March, April, it's just really busy. People are planning their summer vacations or trips for the rest of the year. So that time of the year, we travel quite often 2-3 weeks a month in North America, calling on people like you and people in the industry. And, it's hard to have a routine. It's hard to exercise. So one of the things I thought we can't travel internationally. We don't want to go too far away. You want to stay safe and away from people. So maybe do a long hike or a long bike ride. And I actually learned only last year about bike packing, which is like backpacking, but you put everything on the bike, your sleeping bag and everything else. So you can be self-contained and go for 2 weeks and camp in the wilderness. And so last year, I then attempted the Colorado Trail, which is here local. It was easy. And, with Brooke's help, we turned it into a fundraiser. And, I think we raised about $6,500 for a charity in Cape Town that really, needed the support through COVID. They were supporting communities that, where people lost their jobs and that they have, really problems feeding the communities and maintaining their services. And then, we thought COVID would be over, obviously, like later in 2020. And then suddenly it was still around in the beginning of this year. So, the next step was to do the Arizona Trail, which from Mexico, or the portion from Mexico up to the Grand Canyon. And I just, it was just, I think in this time of COVID, with all the things happening around us, it was also just nice to be able to go out and, clear your head and be out in the wilderness for 2 weeks, not thinking about other things, but thinking about how to get to the next spot and as you go through the ride.
And this one was a fundraiser for the Zambian carnivore program as well. So, we're not normally fundraisers at all. We support travel and tourism, do not actually like selling anything or asking for money. But I also think that people needed or wanted a very easy avenue to feel like they were participating in something larger than themselves. And conservation work in Africa and community work in Africa is so necessary. And so I'm very happy that we were able to do the same and raised about $4,500 for the Zambian carnivore program. And that's all just thanks to the people that followed along like yourself and then wanted to, support these initiatives.
So now, when you do this long bike ride, bikes break down. If you're on the side of the road somewhere and you've blown a tire, what's that whole thing like? I'm sure it's happened.
Yes, it can. Fortunately, actually, for the whole Colorado Trail, I never had a real technical issue at all. And I think I only hit my head on the ground once, aside from technical issues. And with the Arizona Trail, I actually had a little small technical issue. And the interesting thing is people are always like, oh my God, you're out there for 2 weeks. Aren't you scared? Aren't the animals going to get you? Are you, how can you just be out in the middle of nowhere? And the interesting thing is that, you're actually really safe out there. Yes, technical issues come up, but there are bike stores along the way. Like in the Arizona Trail, I had one small technical issue with the rear hub of my wheel. So I actually had to go into a bike store along the way. So I detoured into Phoenix. And I tell you, that was the most dangerous part of my trip. Riding into Phoenix, school bus pushed me off the road. Like people were like distracted on their phones. It was the most dangerous part of my trip. Out there in the wilderness, camping in the wilds, sure. I mean, yes, there are rattlesnakes in Arizona, of course. But most of the time, you probably pass 95% of them without, ever seeing them or them seeing you because you're riding on a bike. And by the time they're going to get their rattle up, you're long gone. And there's bears in the high country. But as long as you hang your food in a tree, because that's the only thing they're interested in, none of the animals are out there to get us. You can safely sleep and camp anywhere. So, yeah.
Well, it's a rather intrepid journey. Were there any spots where, like, you got to some vista and all of a sudden you said, I have to take a picture of this because it's just so gosh darn beautiful?
On the Colorado Trail, that happened about 15 times a day, especially in certain sections of it. Like you get up over a pass and look into the next valley and, your jaw drops. And especially since these trails take you very far away from civilization. So, I mean, there's a difference between, let's say, bike touring in Europe and you're riding on roads and you're connecting cities and those kind of things. This sort of off-road mountain bike trips, a lot of times it's trails that are not really made for biking and you end up pushing your bike. We call it hike-a-bike. And some of them are really, you're like, well, you can take a bike there legally, but why would you? Because it's like straight uphill or something.
Yeah, and it's a 300-foot drop off. You look to your left. I understand. It's like all that, sure.
Exactly, and the whole desert scenery. I mean, the Colorado Trail probably had more jaw-dropping mountain scenery because the whole trail you stay up at around over 10,000 feet. The Arizona Trail was just a different beast. It's riding with the cactuses in the desert and beautiful sunrises and mornings, but also like much harder days during the day because obviously it gets hot down in the desert. But yeah, equally beautiful in places.
Well, that's very interesting. I really appreciate that. I'm not going to do that kind of thing. I'll just stick to my neighborhood, thank you, and I'll do that. I mean, I'll let the more intrepid people go ahead and do this bike packing thing. It's okay. I pitched my tents in my time, but I'm now my comfort zone is like Courtyard by Marriott. What can I tell you? It's like that. Although if I do go on a safari, I realize that most safari locations are not going to be fully enclosed, and that's fine because I think it's really part of the whole experience. So it's really great. Well, you two have been great.
You can do on safari. One of the things you can do on safari, e-bikes. More and more are now starting to have e-bikes. So, on top of just your game drives and your walks, if you are someone who likes cycling, look for a property that has e-bikes, and then you can go and ride through the Mara and ride around. And we've ridden in Zambia and Kenya, probably many other places too. So you can do your wine tour in South Africa the same way you can in Napa on a bike.
That's good. I like that. Well, listen, you two have been excellent. I really appreciate the storytelling. I really appreciate the fact that you guys are experts in your field, which is great. It really helps. And I hope you have a great 4th of July holiday. Hope to see you traveling out there soon. And I can't wait to see all of your adventures. And I really appreciate you being on the podcast with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Lovely.
All right. That is great. Brooke and her husband Johann. They're great. Again, this month only, you get $25 off of a gift card to your favorite establishment, or $50 if you travel credit, but you have to book by July 31st. This is the Walters Wandering Travel Podcast. I'll be back on Tuesday with another edition with a very special guest. Thank you, and have a great day.